The blood-red sunset cast long shadows over Blackwater Creek as Lily Montgomery sat alone by the church bell tower, her trembling hands clutching a worn letter. The news of her brother's death had reached her just this morning, and the weight of solitude pressed down upon her shoulders like the heavy wooden cross that adorned the modest church behind her. It was 1877, and the unforgiving wilderness of the Colorado Territory had claimed yet another soul. "Prayers don't always come alone, miss," a deep voice drawled from behind her. Lily startled, hastily wiping away her tears with the back of her hand. She hadn't heard anyone approach, which was unusual given her typically alert nature. Turning, she found herself looking up at a tall man silhouetted against the dying light of day. His broad shoulders were framed by a well-worn duster, and the unmistakable shape of a cowboy hat sat atop his head. "I beg your pardon," she managed, her voice barely above a whisper. The stranger stepped closer, and Lily could now make out his features. He was ruggedly handsome, with a strong jaw dusted with stubble and eyes the color of a summer storm. A thin scar ran along his left cheekbone, telling silent stories of a hard-lived life. "Said prayers don't always come alone," he repeated, gesturing toward the letter in her hands. "Sometimes they bring answers, too." "My prayers haven't brought anything but more sorrow," Lily replied bitterly, folding the letter and tucking it into the pocket of her simple blue dress. The cowboy removed his hat in a gesture of respect. "Quinn Walker," he introduced himself with a slight nod. "And I'm mighty sorry for whatever has brought such sadness to your eyes, miss." "Lily Montgomery," she returned stiffly, rising to her feet and brushing dust from her skirts. "And I appreciate your concern, Mr. Walker, but I should be getting back before dark." Quinn replaced his hat and glanced at the small settlement visible beyond the church. "Mind if I walk with you? These parts ain't always safe for a lady alone, especially as night falls." Lily hesitated. Her father had always warned her about strangers, particularly the drifting kind that seemed to blow through town like tumbleweeds. But there was something in Quinn Walker's eyes that didn't match the dangerous men her father had described, a kindness, perhaps, or a familiar pain that mirrored her own. "If you insist," she finally conceded, gathering her shawl more tightly around her shoulders against the cooling evening air. They walked in silence through the cemetery that surrounded the church, a somber garden of wooden crosses and modest stone markers. Lily's gaze lingered on the freshly turned earth where just that morning they'd laid her brother's empty casket to rest, a symbolic burial for a body they would never recover from the mine collapse 3 counties over. "You from these parts originally?" Quinn asked as they followed the dirt path toward town. "Born and raised," Lily answered. "My father was one of the first to settle here back when Blackwater Creek was nothing but a trading post and a few tents. And now it's home," she said simply. "My father passed last winter. It was just my brother and me until—" Her voice caught and she couldn't finish the sentence. Quinn nodded in understanding. "Lost my folks young too, been on my own since I was 16. Reckon that's why I noticed you up there by the bell tower, recognize a kindred spirit when I see one." The main street of Blackwater Creek came into view, a single dusty thoroughfare lined with wooden buildings. A few oil lamps had been lit, casting warm pools of light against the encroaching darkness. The general store, the saloon, the blacksmith all were closing up for the night as they passed. "Where are you staying, Mr. Walker?" Lily asked, realizing she hadn't seen him in town before. "Pitched my bedroll just outside town for now. Planning to move on tomorrow or the next day, depending on what work I can find." They reached the small boarding house where Lily had taken a room after selling her family home. She couldn't bear to live there alone, surrounded by ghosts and memories. "This is me," she said, pausing at the front steps. "Thank you for walking me back." Quinn tipped his hat. "My pleasure, Miss Montgomery." He seemed about to turn away, then hesitated. "If you don't mind my asking, what will you do now, with your family gone, I mean?" The blunt question caught Lily off guard, but she found herself answering honestly. "I don't know. I've been teaching at the schoolhouse, but without my brother's income from the mine." She shrugged helplessly. "I'm not sure how long I can stay." "Shame to leave your home behind," Quinn observed. "Yes, well, sometimes we don't have a choice in the matter," Lily replied, a hint of the day's bitterness returning to her voice. "Good night, Mr. Walker." As she turned to enter the boarding house, Quinn spoke again. "Miss Montgomery." The church bell tower, it's a good place for thinking, but maybe not the best for being alone with dark thoughts. If you find yourself up there again, I might just happen by. Lily paused, her hand on the door. She didn't respond, but something in her chest lightened ever so slightly at his words. With a small nod, she disappeared inside, leaving Quinn standing in the growing darkness of Blackwater Creek's Main Street. The following morning dawned clear and bright, with no trace of the previous day's melancholy in the brilliant blue sky. Lily rose early, as was her habit, and prepared for her day at the schoolhouse. The children would be expecting her, regardless of her personal grief, and in truth, she welcomed the distraction their lively presence would provide. As she made her way down the main street, she spotted Quinn outside the general store, deep in conversation with Mr. Peterson, the owner. The cowboy had exchanged his dusty traveling clothes for a clean shirt, though he still wore the same worn hat and duster. He caught her eye as she passed and tipped his hat in greeting. Lily acknowledged him with a slight nod but continued on her way. The schoolhouse was a simple one-room building at the edge of town, painted white with a small bell of its own hanging above the door. Inside, rows of wooden desks awaited the dozen or so children who attended regularly. She was arranging books on her desk when a shadow fell across the doorway. Looking up, she found Quinn leaning against the frame, watching her with an expression of curiosity. "Mr. Walker," she said, straightening. "Is there something I can help you with?" "Just came to deliver this," he replied, holding up a small parcel wrapped in brown paper. "Mrs. Peterson at the store said you'd ordered it last week." Lily took the package with a puzzled frown. "That's very kind, but I didn't order anything," Quinn shrugged. She was quite insistent it was for the schoolteacher, said it was some books you'd been waiting on. Understanding dawned on Lily's face. "Ah, those would have been for my brother, he was." She swallowed hard. "He was learning to read better. I'd ordered some simpler texts to help him practice." An awkward silence fell between them. Quinn shifted his weight, clearly uncomfortable with having inadvertently stirred her grief. "I'm sorry," he offered. "No need to apologize," Lily said, placing the parcel on her desk without opening it. "Thank you for bringing it by." Quinn nodded and turned to leave, then paused. "I took a job with Mr. Peterson this morning. Stocking, deliveries, that sort of thing. Seems his usual boy broke his leg last week." "I see," Lily said, uncertain why he was telling her this. "Just thought you should know I'll be around a while longer, in case you need anything." His eyes held hers for a moment longer than was strictly proper, then he touched the brim of his hat and was gone. The first children began arriving shortly after, and Lily pushed thoughts of the mysterious cowboy from her mind as she welcomed her students and began the day's lessons. It wasn't until later, as the afternoon shadows lengthened and she dismissed the children, that Quinn Walker crossed her mind again. There was something about him that intrigued her, perhaps the way he seemed both part of and separate from the world around him, or maybe the quiet strength he carried so effortlessly. As if conjured by her thoughts, she spotted him across the street as she left the schoolhouse, loading crates into the back of Mr. Peterson's wagon. He worked efficiently, his movements sure and practiced, suggesting this wasn't the first time he'd done such labor. Lily found herself watching him for a moment too long, and when he glanced up and caught her gaze, a warm flush crept up her neck. Embarrassed to be caught staring, she quickly looked away and continued walking, heading not toward the boarding house but in the direction of the church. The bell tower stood tall against the afternoon sky, a silent sentinel over the small community. Lily climbed the narrow wooden stairs that wound up the inside of the tower, emerging onto the small platform where she'd sat the previous evening. From here, she could see most of Blackwater Creek spread out below, and beyond it, the vast expanse of prairie stretching to the distant mountains. She hadn't intended to return so soon, but something drew her to this quiet place above the world. Perhaps it was the solitude, or the perspective that came from seeing the town laid out like a child's playset, making her own troubles seem smaller in comparison. The sound of boots on the wooden stairs startled her from her reverie. She turned to find Quinn emerging onto the platform, slightly out of breath from the climb. "Thought I might find you here," he said, leaning against the railing beside her. "Are you following me, Mr. Walker?" Lily asked, not entirely displeased by his presence despite her accusing tone. "Just keeping a promise," he replied with a small smile. "Said I might happen by if you came up here again." Lily turned back to the view, letting the breeze play with loose strands of her chestnut hair. "It's peaceful up here, makes everything else seem far away." "That it does," Quinn agreed, his gaze sweeping over the landscape. "Been to a lot of places, but there's something special about this view, sky big enough to swallow all your troubles if you let it." They stood in companionable silence for a time, watching as the sun began its descent toward the horizon, painting the sky in shades of gold and amber. "My brother loved it up here," Lily said finally, her voice soft with memory. "Used to say he could see clear to tomorrow from this spot." Quinn glanced at her. "Tell me about him." The simple request opened a floodgate. Before she knew it, Lily was sharing stories of growing up with her brother James, his mischievous nature, his kindness, his dreams of striking it rich in the mines so they could move back east where opportunities were greater. Quinn listened attentively, asking questions that showed he was genuinely interested, not just being polite. "Sounds like a good man," he said when she finally fell silent. "He was," Lily agreed, surprised to find that talking about James had brought comfort rather than renewed pain. "What about you, Mr. Walker? You mentioned being on your own since 16. No family anywhere." Quinn's expression turned distant. "Had a younger sister once, lost her to fever when she was just 7. Parents followed a few years later, father to a mining accident, mother to a broken heart." He said it matter-of-factly, without self-pity. "Been drifting ever since, taking work where I can find it." "That's a lonely life," Lily observed. "Can be," he acknowledged. "But it has its freedoms too, no one expecting anything of you, no roots to hold you down." "No one to miss you either," she pointed out softly. Their eyes met, and something unspoken passed between them, a recognition of shared loss, perhaps, or an understanding of what it meant to stand alone in the world. The church bell suddenly rang out below them, its deep tone reverberating through the wooden structure of the tower. Lily started at the sound. "That'll be Reverend Simmons calling for evening prayers," she explained, moving toward the stairs. "We should go down." Quinn followed her lead, descending the narrow staircase behind her. At the bottom, they emerged into the lengthening shadows of early evening, the church doors open to welcome the faithful. "Will you attend?" Lily asked, gesturing toward the church. Quinn shook his head. "Not much for organized religion myself, find my peace elsewhere." He looked up at the bell tower they'd just left. "Besides, reckon I've already done my praying for the day." Lily raised an eyebrow. "Up there." "Sometimes the highest point is the best place to be heard," he said with a slight smile. "Evening, Miss Montgomery." With that, he tipped his hat and walked away, his long strides carrying him back toward town. Lily watched him go, a curious feeling stirring in her chest. Then, with a small shake of her head, she turned and entered the church, joining the scattered congregation for evening prayers. The days that followed fell into a pattern. Lily would teach at the schoolhouse, and occasionally glimpse Quinn around town as he went about his work for Mr. Peterson. Sometimes they would exchange nods or brief greetings, but they didn't speak at length again until the following Sunday, after church services. Lily emerged from the church to find Quinn leaning against a hitching post, apparently waiting for her. He'd made some effort with his appearance, his hair neatly combed and his shirt freshly pressed, though he still wore his trail-worn boots and duster. "Miss Montgomery," he greeted her, straightening as she approached. "Mr. Walker," she returned, noting with some surprise that he'd attended the service after all, though he'd sat at the very back and slipped out before the final hymn. "I thought you weren't one for church." "Wasn't," he admitted, "but found myself curious about what draws you here so regularly." "Faith, Mr. Walker," she said simply. "The belief that there's more to this world than what we can see or touch. And has it brought you comfort? Since your brother, I mean." The directness of his question might have offended her coming from anyone else, but from Quinn, it seemed natural and honest inquiry rather than an intrusion. "Some," she acknowledged. "Though comfort isn't always the point of faith." He nodded thoughtfully. "Would you care to walk?" It's a fine day, and I've a proposition I'd like to discuss with you. Intrigued despite herself, Lily agreed, and they set off down the main street, past the Sunday quiet storefronts and toward the edge of town. What sort of proposition? She asked when they'd gone a short distance. Quinn looked slightly uncomfortable, as if uncertain how to begin. Mr. Peterson mentioned you might be leaving Blackwater Creek soon. News travels fast in small towns, Lily commented dryly. Yes, I'm considering it. The school term ends in 3 weeks, and without my brother's income, I can't afford to stay much longer. Where would you go? Denver, perhaps, or back east to St. Louis where my mother's sister lives. There are more opportunities for a single woman in the cities, she sighed. Though I'll miss this place terribly. They had reached the outskirts of town, where the buildings gave way to scattered homesteads and beyond them, open country. Quinn guided them toward a small copse of cottonwood trees that provided shade against the midday sun. What if you didn't have to leave? He asked, stopping beneath the rustling leaves. Lily looked at him quizzically. I don't understand. Quinn removed his hat, turning it in his hands as he chose his words carefully. Mr. Peterson owns some property just outside town, small ranch, nothing fancy. Previous tenant moved on last month. He's offered me the chance to work at raise some cattle, grow enough to supply his store. Says I can live in the house that's on the property. That sounds like a fine opportunity for you, Lily said, still confused about how this related to her situation. It's more house than one man needs, Quinn continued, his eyes fixed on the hat in his hands rather than meeting her gaze. And the work would be easier with a partner. Understanding dawned slowly and Lily's eyes widened. Mr. Walker, are you proposing some sort of arrangement? He looked up then, his expression earnest. Marriage, Miss Montgomery, I'm proposing marriage. Lily took an involuntary step back, shock evident on her face. That's absurd, we barely know each other. I know you're kind and patient with those children you teach. I know you're devoted to your family and your faith. I know you're facing a future alone in a world that's not always gentle to women without protection. He stepped closer, his voice low and intense. And I know that in the short time I've known you, I've come to admire you greatly. Admiration is hardly a basis for marriage, Lily protested, though she felt a strange flutter in her chest at his words. Perhaps not, Quinn conceded. But it's a start. And practical considerations aren't to be dismissed lightly. You need security, I need a partner, we could help each other. You make it sound like a business arrangement, Lily said, a hint of disappointment coloring her tone despite her outward rejection of the idea. Quinn's expression softened. It would be more than that, Lily. I wouldn't expect. That is to say, I would hope in time that affection might grow between us. But I would never presume or demand anything you weren't willing to give freely. Lily stared at him, trying to reconcile the practical stranger before her with the idea of a husband. It was true that her options were limited, and the prospect of starting over alone in a strange city was daunting. But marriage, to a man she'd known for barely a week, this is very sudden, she said finally. I need time to think. Relief crossed Quinn's face at her response, not an outright rejection. Of course, take all the time you need, I'll be here. He hesitated, then added quietly, I'm not asking out of pity, Lily. I want you to know that. She nodded, unable to find words to respond. They walked back to town in silence, each lost in their own thoughts, and parted at the boarding house with nothing more than a murmured goodbye. That night, Lily lay awake long into the small hours, Quinn's proposal turning over and over in her mind. It was mad, of course, marrying a man she barely knew, a drifter who had appeared in town less than 2 weeks ago. And yet, there was something about Quinn Walker that inspired trust. He had been nothing but respectful and kind in their interactions, and she couldn't deny the small thrill that ran through her whenever their eyes met. Was it enough? Could respect and practical necessity be sufficient foundation for a marriage? Many unions began with less, she knew. Her own parents had been strangers when they wed, brought together by her grandparents' arrangement, and they had found happiness together over time. Still undecided, Lily finally drifted into a restless sleep as the first light of dawn began to creep through her window. The next morning brought no clarity. Lily went about her duties at the schoolhouse with half her mind still occupied by Quinn's unexpected proposal. The children seemed to sense her distraction, becoming more boisterous than usual, until she finally called them to order with more sharpness than she typically allowed herself to display. At midday, as the children ate their lunches in the schoolyard, Lily noticed Quinn across the street, loading the Petersons' wagon once again. He glanced up, catching her watching him, and raised a hand in greeting but made no move to approach. She appreciated his restraint. He was giving her the space she'd requested to consider his offer. By the time school ended for the day, Lily had made a decision not about the proposal itself, but about how to proceed. She needed to know more about Quinn Walker before she could even contemplate accepting such an offer. With that in mind, she made her way to the general store, where Mrs. Peterson was arranging a display of canned goods. "Afternoon, Lily," the older woman greeted her warmly. "What can I help you with today?" "Actually, Mrs. Peterson, I was hoping to speak with you about Mr. Walker," Lily said, lowering her voice slightly though the store was empty of other customers. Mrs. Peterson's eyebrows rose with interest. "Quinn, what about him?" "I was wondering what you know of him, his background, his character, that sort of thing." A knowing smile spread across the shopkeeper's face. "Has he caught your eye then? Can't say I'm surprised. Handsome man and those eyes of his." She sighed appreciatively, then caught herself. "But to answer your question, we don't know much about his past. He keeps to himself, that one. But Thomas, my husband, says he's the hardest worker he's seen in years. Honest, too. Found a gold piece that had fallen behind the counter last week and turned it right in, no hesitation." Lily nodded, absorbing this information. "And the ranch property Mr. Peterson offered him, is that true?" "Oh yes," Mrs. Peterson confirmed. "Small place about a mile outside town. The Hendersons worked it before they moved on to California. Got a decent house, barn, some good grazing land. Thomas thinks Quinn could make something of it with time and effort." She paused, studying Lily's face. "Any particular reason you're asking, dear?" Lily felt heat rise to her cheeks. "Just curious," she said, knowing the deflection wouldn't fool the perceptive older woman but unwilling to discuss Quinn's proposal until she'd made her decision. Mrs. Peterson smiled kindly. "Well, if you want my opinion, he seems a good sort. Keeps his word, works hard, treats people with respect. Those are qualities worth considering in a man, wouldn't you say?" "Yes," Lily agreed softly. "Yes, they are." She left the store with her thoughts still in turmoil, but now leaning more toward consideration than outright rejection of Quinn's offer. She found her feet carrying her toward the church once again, seeking the peace and perspective that the bell tower had provided before. The climb up the narrow stairs seemed longer this time, her steps heavy with the weight of the decision before her. At the top, she was surprised to find she wasn't alone. Quinn stood at the railing, gazing out over the town as she had done so many times. He turned at the sound of her arrival, his expression a mixture of surprise and what might have been hope. "Lily," he said, foregoing formality in his surprise. "I didn't expect to see you here." "Nor I you," she replied, remaining by the stairway. "I can leave if you prefer solitude." "No," he said quickly. "Please stay." He gestured to the railing beside him. "Best view in Blackwater Creek after all." Lily hesitated, then moved to join him, maintaining a proper distance between them as they both looked out over the landscape. The late afternoon sun bathed everything in a golden light, making the humble buildings of the town seem almost picturesque. "I've been thinking about your proposal," she said after a silence that stretched just to the edge of discomfort. "And," Quinn prompted when she didn't continue. "And I have questions," Lily said, turning to face him directly. "If I'm to consider such an arrangement, I need to know more about the man I'd be binding myself to." Quinn nodded, his expression serious. "Fair enough, ask what you will." "Where are you from originally?" "Texas," he answered readily. "Small settlement outside of San Antonio. My father raised horses before the war changed everything." "The war?" Lily asked, knowing he meant the Civil War that had torn the nation apart more than a decade earlier. Quinn's jaw tightened slightly. "He fought for the Confederacy. Not because he believed in slavery, we never owned slaves, but because he believed in defending his home. When he came back, everything was different. The ranch was failing, and he never quite recovered from what he'd seen. He paused, as if deciding how much to share. That's when we moved north, trying for a fresh start, but luck wasn't with us. Lily absorbed this, noting the pain that still lingered in his eyes when he spoke of his father. And after your parents passed, what then? Did what I had to, Quinn said with a shrug. Worked cattle drives, tried my hand at mining, took odd jobs in towns across the territories, never stayed anywhere too long. Why not? He considered the question carefully. At first it was restlessness. Thought if I kept moving, I might outrun the memories. Later. I suppose I never found a reason to stay. Their eyes met, and the unspoken implication hung in the air between them that perhaps he had found such a reason now in her. And why me? Lily asked softly. There must be other women in need of security, other potential partners you could have chosen. Quinn's gaze held her steadily. There's something about you, Lily Montgomery, a strength despite everything you've lost, a kindness that doesn't turn to bitterness even in grief. From that first moment I saw you sitting here, I knew you were different. The sincerity in his voice touched something deep within her, a place that had been closed off since the news of her brother's death had reached her. It wasn't love, not yet, but it was a recognition of possibility, a glimpse of what might grow between them given time and care. I can't promise you love, she said honestly. Not now. I'm not asking for promises, Quinn replied. Just a chance for both of us. Lily took a deep breath, the biggest decision of her life balanced on the edge of a single word. Yes, she said finally. I'll marry you, Quinn Walker. Not for love, not yet, but for the chance that it might grow between us. The relief and joy that transformed Quinn's face made her heart skip a beat. He reached for her hand, his touch gentle as he raised it to his lips in a gesture both old-fashioned and deeply touching. I'll do right by you, Lily, he vowed, his voice rough with emotion. That's my promise to you. As the sun set behind them, casting long shadows across the town below, Lily felt a curious mixture of trepidation and hope. She was agreeing to bind her life to a near stranger. Yet somehow, standing beside Quinn in the bell tower where they had first met, it felt less like recklessness and more like fate. The wedding took place 2 weeks later in the same church whose bell tower had witnessed their unusual courtship. It was a simple affair, Lily in her best dress, not white, but a pale blue that brought out the warmth in her eyes. Quinn in a new shirt and the cleanest pair of trousers he owned. Reverend Simmons officiated, with the Petersons serving as witnesses and a handful of townspeople, including Lily's students, in attendance. The ceremony was brief, the traditional vows exchanged with quiet sincerity. When Quinn slipped a simple gold band onto Lily's finger, purchased with savings he'd carefully accumulated over years of wandering, she felt a tremor run through her that was equal parts fear and anticipation. I now pronounce you man and wife, Reverend Simmons declared, his weathered face creased in a smile. You may kiss your bride, Mr. Walker. Quinn leaned forward, his movements careful and respectful, and pressed his lips to Lily's in a kiss that was gentle but held the promise of deeper passion to come. It was their first kiss, and Lily found herself responding with unexpected warmth, her hand rising to rest against his chest before they parted. A small celebration followed at the Petersons' home, with cake and cider and well wishes from the community that had become Lily's family after the loss of her own. Mrs. Peterson hugged her tightly before they departed. You've made a good choice, my dear, she whispered. I can see it in the way he looks at you. As twilight fell, Quinn helped Lily into the wagon he'd borrowed from Mr. Peterson, her few possessions loaded in the back alongside supplies for their new home. The small ranch house waiting for them lay just beyond the edge of town, its windows dark but promising shelter and a fresh beginning. They rode in silence for much of the journey, the creak of the wagon wheels and the steady clip-clop of the horses' hooves the only sounds in the gathering darkness. Lily's thoughts raced ahead to what awaited her: a new home, a new life, and a wedding night with a man she was only beginning to know. As if sensing her nervousness, Quinn spoke quietly. I meant what I said before, Lily. I won't expect anything you're not ready to give. She glanced at him, his profile strong against the darkening sky. I know my duties as a wife, Quinn. His hands tightened on the reins briefly. "This isn't about duty, not for me. If we come together as husband and wife, I want it to be because we both desire it, not because you feel obligated." The consideration in his words eased some of the tension from Lily's shoulders. "Thank you," she said softly, "for understanding." The ranch house emerged from the darkness ahead of them, a solid structure of logs and timber with a covered porch stretching across the front. Quinn drew the wagon to a halt and jumped down, coming around to help Lily descend. But instead of letting her walk to the house, he surprised her by scooping her into his arms, eliciting a startled laugh as he carried her across the threshold. "Welcome home, Mrs. Walker," he said, setting her gently on her feet in what appeared to be the main living area. Lily looked around, taking in her new surroundings in the dim light. The house was sparsely furnished but clean, with a stone fireplace dominating one wall and simple, sturdy furniture arranged throughout the open space. A doorway led to what she presumed was the bedroom, and a small kitchen area occupied one corner. "It's not much," Quinn said, a hint of apology in his voice as he lit a lamp, casting a warm glow over the room. "But we can make it our own in time." "It's perfect," Lily assured him, and found she meant it. After the cramped room at the boarding house, the space felt generous and full of possibility. "Our home." The words felt strange on her tongue, our home, but not unpleasant. She moved about the room, touching the back of a chair, the edge of a table, familiarizing herself with her new domain while Quinn brought in her belongings from the wagon. When everything was settled inside, Quinn built a fire in the fireplace to ward off the evening chill. They sat before it on a worn but comfortable sofa, the dancing flames casting flickering shadows across their faces. "Are you hungry?" Quinn asked. "Mrs. Peterson sent along some food for us." "No," Lily replied, though her stomach was tied in knots that had nothing to do with hunger. "Perhaps later." An awkward silence fell between them, the reality of their situation suddenly stark in the intimate setting. They were husband and wife, alone together for the first time, the expectations of their wedding night hanging unspoken in the air between them. Quinn cleared his throat. "I'll make up a bed for myself out here tonight, give you privacy in the bedroom." Lily looked at him in surprise. "That's not necessary." "I think it might be," he said gently, "just for now, until we know each other better." Relief and an unexpected twinge of disappointment mingled in Lily's chest. "If you're sure." "I am," Quinn affirmed. "We have time, Lily, all the time we need." The thoughtfulness of his gesture touched her deeply. Here was a man who could have claimed his husbandly rights without question, yet chose instead to give her space and time to adjust to their new circumstances. Impulsively, she leaned forward and pressed a soft kiss to his cheek. "Thank you," she whispered. Quinn's eyes darkened slightly at the contact, but he maintained his self-control, simply nodding in acknowledgement of her gratitude. Later, as Lily lay alone in the bedroom, listening to the soft sounds of Quinn moving about in the main room, she reflected on the strange path that had led her to this moment. A fortnight ago, she had been a grieving sister contemplating a solitary future far from the only home she'd ever known. Now she was a wife, with a new name and a new beginning stretching before her. "Lily Walker," she whispered to herself, testing the sound of it in the darkness. It wasn't a name she had ever expected to bear, but as she drifted toward sleep, she found herself thinking it might suit her after all. The following weeks brought a rhythm to their shared life that was both strange and comforting. Quinn rose before dawn each day to tend to the small herd of cattle Mr. Peterson had helped him acquire, while Lily continued her teaching duties at the schoolhouse in town. In the evenings, they would share simple meals by lamplight, their conversations gradually growing more relaxed as they became accustomed to each other's presence. Quinn kept his word about giving her time to adjust to their marriage. Each night, he would bid her good night at the bedroom door, retiring to his makeshift bed in the main room without complaint or pressure. Lily found herself both grateful for his patience and increasingly curious about the man she had married. She learned that Quinn had a dry sense of humor that emerged when he was relaxed, that he could read, but did so laboriously, having had little formal education. He was skilled with his hands, fixing things around the ranch house that had fallen into disrepair and crafting small wooden figures that he would sometimes leave for her to find a tiny horse on the kitchen table, a delicate flower beside her pillow. For his part, Quinn discovered that his wife had a sweet singing voice that she employed while doing household chores, that she loved thunderstorms and would stand on the porch watching lightning fork across the sky with childlike wonder, and that, beneath her proper schoolteacher exterior, lay a mind that was quick and curious about the world. One evening in late summer, as they sat on the porch watching fireflies dance in the gathering darkness, Quinn tentatively reached for Lily's hand. She gave it willingly, their fingers intertwining with a naturalness that surprised them both. "Are you happy, Lily?" He asked quietly, his eyes fixed on the distant horizon rather than her face. Lily considered the question carefully. "Yes," she answered truthfully. "Not in the way I expected to find happiness, perhaps, but yes, I am." Quinn's hand tightened around hers. "I want to give you more than just security, you know. I want to give you a good life, a full one." "You already have," Lily assured him, turning to study his profile in the fading light. "Quinn, I've been thinking, it's been almost 2 months since we wed." He glanced at her, a question in his eyes. "It has. I think perhaps it's time you stopped sleeping on that uncomfortable sofa," she said, her voice steady despite the flush she could feel rising to her cheeks. Quinn went very still beside her. "Are you certain?" "I am," Lily confirmed, surprised by her own certainty. Over the weeks of living together, working together, learning each other's habits and quirks, something had shifted between them. What had begun as a practical arrangement had developed subtle tendrils of deeper feeling respect, had bloomed into admiration, cautious friendship into genuine affection. That night, when Quinn followed her into the bedroom they would now truly share, there was a moment of shy awkwardness that quickly gave way to tender discovery. His touch was gentle, reverent almost, as if he couldn't quite believe he was permitted such intimacy. And Lily, who had approached her wedding night with trepidation, found herself responding with an openness that surprised them both. In the quiet aftermath, as they lay tangled together in the darkness, Quinn pressed a kiss to her temple and whispered, "I think I'm falling in love with you, Lily Walker." The words sent a warm current through her body. "I think perhaps I'm falling in love with you too," she admitted, the truth of it settling comfortably in her heart. As summer gave way to autumn, their bond deepened. The ranch prospered under Quinn's diligent care, with the cattle thriving and a small vegetable garden Lily had planted yielding a bountiful harvest. They added chickens and a milk cow, making their little homestead increasingly self-sufficient. On Sundays, they would attend church together, then often join the Petersons or other friends from town for dinner and socializing. The community had embraced them as a couple, seeming to forget that their union had begun under such unusual circumstances. To everyone around them, and increasingly to themselves, they were simply Mr. and Mrs. Walker, a young couple building a life together. It was in late October, as the leaves turned golden on the cottonwood trees, and the first hints of winter chilled the morning air, that Lily realized something had changed within her body. Her monthly courses, always regular as clockwork, had failed to appear. At first, she dismissed it as stress or perhaps the change in her circumstances, but as a second week passed, she began to suspect the truth. She kept the suspicion to herself for several days, observing other subtle changes, a new tenderness in her breasts, a slight queasiness in the mornings before finally confirming what her body had been trying to tell her. She was with child. The realization brought a complex mixture of emotions. Joy, certainly she had always wanted children, but also fear. The child would arrive in early summer, barely a year into their marriage. Were they ready for this next step? Would Quinn welcome the news or feel trapped by this new responsibility? She chose to tell him on a crisp November evening as they sat before the fire, Quinn carving a new wooden figure while Lily mended one of his shirts. The domesticity of the scene gave her courage. "Quinn," she began, setting aside her sewing, "I have something to tell you." He looked up, his hand stilling on the piece of wood he was shaping. "What is it?" Lily took a deep breath. "I'm going to have a baby, our baby." Next summer, I think. Quinn's expression transformed, disbelief giving way to wonder and then to a joy so pure it brought tears to Lily's eyes. He set aside his carving and moved to kneel before her, taking her hands in his. "A baby," he repeated, his voice rough with emotion. "Our child." Lily nodded, relief washing through her at his obvious happiness. "Are you pleased?" In answer, Quinn gathered her into his arms, holding her as if she were made of the most precious material on earth. "Please doesn't begin to cover it," he murmured against her hair. "Lily, my Lily, you've given me a home, a purpose, and now a family. I never dared hope for so much." She pulled back slightly to look into his face, seeing there all the love and tenderness she could have wished for. "We built this together," she reminded him, "from that strange beginning at the church bell tower." Quinn smiled, reaching up to brush a strand of hair from her face with gentle fingers. "Prayers don't always come alone," he quoted his own words from their first meeting. "Sometimes they bring answers too." "Is that what I am?" Lily asked, a teasing note in her voice. "Your answer." "You're everything," Quinn replied simply, and kissed her with a depth of feeling that left no room for doubt. The winter that followed was harsh, with heavy snowfall and bitter cold that tested the resilience of the entire community. But within the snug confines of their ranch house, Lily and Quinn found warmth in each other, and in the anticipation of the new life growing steadily beneath Lily's heart. Quinn became fiercely protective, insisting on taking over more of Lily's usual chores and fretting when she made the increasingly difficult journey to town to continue her teaching duties. By February, with the snow piled high and Lily's condition becoming more pronounced, she reluctantly agreed to suspend her teaching until after the baby's arrival. The enforced confinement of winter brought them even closer. Long evenings were spent reading aloud to each other, Quinn's skill improving under Lily's patient guidance. They played checkers and cards, shared stories of their childhoods, and made plans for the future, their future, which now stretched before them bright with promise. "What shall we name the baby?" Lily asked one snowy night as they lay in bed, Quinn's hand resting protectively over the swell of her stomach where their child occasionally made its presence known with fluttering movements. "If it's a boy, I thought perhaps James," Quinn suggested softly. "After your brother." Tears pricked at Lily's eyes at the thoughtfulness of the gesture. "I'd like that very much," she said. "And if it's a girl," Quinn considered for a moment. "Sophia," he decided. "It was my mother's name." "James or Sophia Walker," Lily mused, rolling the names on her tongue. "Both sound just right." As winter gradually released its grip on the land and the first tentative signs of spring appeared, Lily's body continued its remarkable transformation. Her slender frame now carried a pronounced roundness that made her movements slower and more deliberate. Quinn watched the changes with fascination and not a little anxiety, aware of the dangers that childbirth could pose even to the healthiest of women. In late April, as wildflowers began to carpet the prairie, and new calves wobbled alongside their mothers in the pasture, Mrs. Peterson arrived at the ranch house with her daughter-in-law, Sarah, who had experience as a midwife. "Thought it was time we had a proper visit," Mrs. Peterson announced, though the true purpose of their call was evident in the assessing gaze Sarah directed at Lily's expanded waistline. After examining Lily in the privacy of the bedroom, Sarah emerged with a reassuring smile. "Everything appears to be progressing normally, Mrs. Walker. The baby is positioned well and you seem healthy and strong. I would estimate you have about 6 to 8 weeks remaining." Quinn's relief was palpable. He had been growing increasingly anxious as Lily's time drew nearer, all too aware of how far they were from a doctor or proper medical care. The midwife's assessment eased some of his fears, though he knew the real trial was still to come. "I'll be close by when your time comes," Sarah promised, as she and Mrs. Peterson prepared to leave. "Send word at the first signs of labor, and I'll come straight away." The weeks that followed were a time of nervous anticipation and practical preparation. Quinn built a cradle, fashioning it from pine wood, and lining it with soft blankets Mrs. Peterson had helped Lily sew. They rearranged the bedroom to accommodate the new addition and washed and folded the tiny garments that had been gifted to them by women from the church. In early June, On a night when the air was heavy with the scent of rain and distant thunder rumbled across the plains, Lily woke to a sharp pain that tightened across her abdomen. She lay still for a moment, waiting to see if it would return, and when it did several minutes later, she gently shook Quinn awake. "It's time," she whispered, her voice steady despite the flutter of fear in her chest. "The baby is coming." Quinn was instantly alert, his face a mixture of excitement and terror. "Are you certain?" As if in answer, another contraction gripped Lily stronger than the last. She nodded, unable to speak until it passed. "Yes," she gasped finally. "You should fetch Sarah." Quinn hesitated, clearly torn between the need to get help and his reluctance to leave Lily alone. "I don't want to leave you." "You must," Lily insisted. "The pains are still far apart. There's time, but Sarah should be here before they get stronger." With obvious reluctance, Quinn dressed hastily and pressed a kiss to Lily's forehead. "I'll be as quick as I can," he promised. "Hold on, my love." The hours that followed were a blur of pain and determined endurance for Lily. Sarah arrived just as dawn was breaking, calm and competent in the face of what would be a long and difficult labor. Quinn was banished to the main room, where he paced restlessly, flinching at each cry that escaped from behind the closed bedroom door. It was nearing sunset when a different cry finally pierced the air, the indignant wail of a newborn taking its first breath. Quinn froze in his pacing, his heart hammering against his ribs as he stared at the bedroom door, willing it to open. When it finally did, Sarah emerged looking tired but triumphant. "Congratulations, Mr. Walker," she said with a broad smile. "You have a daughter, a beautiful, healthy little girl." Quinn stood rooted to the spot, overwhelmed by a rush of emotion so powerful it momentarily robbed him of speech. "Lily," he managed finally, "is she?" "Your wife is fine," Sarah assured him. "Tired, of course, but she came through splendidly. She's asking for you." Quinn moved past her with reverent steps, entering the bedroom where the most important people in his world waited. Lily lay propped against pillows, her face pale and drawn with exhaustion but radiant with a joy that took his breath away. In her arms, wrapped in a soft blanket, was a tiny bundle. "Quinn," Lily said softly as he approached the bed, "come meet your daughter." He sat carefully on the edge of the bed, his hands trembling slightly as Lily tilted the bundle toward him. A small face, still red and wrinkled from the ordeal of birth, peered up at him from beneath a wisp of dark hair that promised to be the same shade as his own. "Sophia," he whispered, reaching out to touch one impossibly tiny hand with a gentle finger. The baby reflexively grasped it, her grip surprisingly strong for one so small, and in that moment, Quinn's heart expanded with a love so fierce it was almost painful. "She's perfect, Lily, just perfect." Lily's eyes filled with tears of joy and exhaustion. "She has your eyes, I think, that same stormy gray." Quinn leaned forward to press a tender kiss to Lily's lips. "Thank you," he murmured against them. "For her, for us, for everything." As night fell over the ranch house, with Sarah discreetly occupied in the kitchen and the new parents absorbed in wonder at their creation, Quinn found himself reflecting on the strange and beautiful journey that had brought them to this moment. Less than a year ago, he had been a drifter with no fixed home or purpose, stopping in a small town with no intention of staying more than a few days. Then he had spotted a lonely figure sitting by the church bell tower, a woman whose grief had called to something in his own wounded soul, and everything had changed. "What are you thinking?" Lily asked softly, noticing his pensive expression as he gazed at their sleeping daughter. "I'm thinking about fate," Quinn replied, "about how some things that seem like chance are perhaps something more. Like a wandering cowboy happening upon a grieving schoolteacher," he smiled, reaching out to brush a strand of hair from her forehead with tender fingers. "Exactly like that. I wasn't looking for you, Lily, but somehow I found you anyway. Or perhaps we found each other," she suggested. "Two lost souls who needed what the other had to give." Quinn nodded, his throat tight with emotion. "I love you, Lily Walker," he said, the words simple but profound in their truth. "More than I ever thought possible." "And I love you," Lily replied, her eyes holding his with unwavering certainty. "My unlikely answer to prayers I didn't even know I was saying." Outside, the church bell in town rang out, marking the hour with its deep, resonant tone. The sound carried across the prairie to their small ranch house, a reminder of where their story had begun and a benediction on where it had led them to each other, to love, to the sleeping miracle they had created together. In the years that followed, Blackwater Creek would witness the continued unfolding of their story. The small ranch would prosper under Quinn's careful management, expanding to include more cattle and eventually horses, reminiscent of his father's Texas ranch. Lily would return to teaching for a time, then open a small school on their own property when Sophia was joined by a brother James, as they had planned, and later, another sister. The church bell tower would remain a special place for them, a spot they would visit on anniversaries to remember their unlikely beginning. And whenever a new arrival to town would express surprise at their happiness, at the evident depth of love between them despite their hasty union, Quinn would smile and repeat the words he had spoken to Lily on that fateful day. Prayers don't always come alone. Sometimes they bring answers, too. And Lily, her hand securely in his, would smile back, knowing that in each other they had found the answer to questions their hearts had been asking all along. The once small ranch had blossomed into a thriving homestead by the time Sophia celebrated her 5th birthday. Quinn had added a second story to the house, providing more space for their growing family. James, now 3, was a sturdy boy with his mother's thoughtful expression and his father's determined nature. Their youngest, 2-year-old Elizabeth, named for Lily's mother, toddled about the yard, her curls bouncing with each step. Summer had settled over the land, bringing long days of sunshine and occasional fierce thunderstorms that rejuvenated the prairie. On this particular July morning, Lily stood on the porch, watching Quinn teach Sophia to ride her first pony, a gentle, dappled mare he had selected specifically for their daughter. "Keep your heels down, little one," Quinn instructed, walking alongside the pony with one hand on Sophia's back to steady her. "That's it, you're doing beautifully." Sophia's face was a picture of concentration and delight, her dark hair so like her father's escaping from its braids as she bounced slightly in the small saddle. "Look, Mama, I'm riding all by myself," she called, though Quinn's hand remained firmly in place. "I see that, darling," Lily replied with a smile. "You're a natural, just like your father." Quinn glanced up at his wife, his eyes crinkling at the corners in the way she loved. 7 years had added a few strands of silver to his temples and deeper lines around his eyes, but he was still as handsome as the day she had first seen him silhouetted against the sunset by the church bell tower. Life had not always been easy in those intervening years. There had been droughts that threatened the cattle, a winter so harsh they had lost part of the herd, and a frightening time when James had developed a fever so high they feared for his life. But through it all, their bond had only strengthened, each challenge faced together with a unity that had grown from their unusual beginning. As noon approached, Lily called the family in for the midday meal. The children washed up at the pump outside while Quinn stabled the pony, joining them a few minutes later with the contented expression he always wore when working with horses. "Mrs. Peterson sent word that there's to be a town gathering on Saturday," Lily mentioned as they sat around the table she had set with care. "In honor of Blackwater Creek's 20th anniversary. Will there be cake?" James asked eagerly, his young face lighting up at the prospect. "I expect so," Lily laughed, ruffling his hair. "And games for the children, music for dancing." "Dancing?" Sophia exclaimed. "Papa, will you dance with me?" "I'd be honored, Miss Sophia," Quinn replied with a formal nod that made his daughter giggle. "Though I warn you, your mother still complains about her toes after all these years. Only because you've never quite mastered the difference between a waltz and a stampede," Lily teased, her eyes warm with affection. Quinn reached across the table to take her hand, his thumb tracing circles on her palm in a gesture that still sent pleasant shivers up her arm. "You've never seemed to mind too much." The look that passed between them spoke volumes of private moments shared, of a passion that had only deepened with time, of a love that had grown from cautious beginnings into something rich and enduring. Later that evening, after the children were tucked into bed and the house had settled into nighttime quiet, Quinn and Lily sat on the porch swing he had built the previous summer. The prairie stretched before them, bathed in moonlight, the occasional call of a coyote breaking the peaceful silence. "Do you ever think about how different our lives might have been?" Lily asked, her head resting comfortably on Quinn's shoulder. "If you hadn't stopped in Blackwater Creek, or if I hadn't been at the bell tower that evening." Quinn was quiet for a moment, his arm tightening around her shoulders. "Sometimes," he admitted, "I might still be drifting, I suppose, moving from place to place, never putting down roots." He pressed a kiss to the top of her head. "A hollow life compared to what I found here. And I might have gone to Denver or St. Louis," Lily mused. "Perhaps found work as a teacher there, lived a respectable spinster's life." "Would you have been happy?" Quinn asked. Lily tilted her face up to look at him, the years of shared life written in the intimate knowledge of every line and plane of his beloved face. "I would have survived," she said thoughtfully. "But happy? No, not like this." Quinn lowered his head to capture her lips in a kiss that still held all the tenderness and passion of their early days together. "I thank God every day for bringing you into my life," he murmured when they parted. "My beautiful, brave Lily." She smiled, settling back against him as the swing creaked gently beneath them. "And I thank him for sending me an answer in the form of a wandering cowboy who knew just what to say to a grieving woman." The town gathering on Saturday was a lively affair, with nearly every resident of Blackwater Creek in attendance. Tables laden with food lined the main street, which had been decorated with colorful bunting and lanterns that would be lit as evening approached. Children ran about playing games of tag and hoops, while the adults congregated in groups, sharing news and reminiscences. The Walkers arrived mid-afternoon, the children immediately darting off to join their friends. Quinn, now a respected rancher and a member of the town council, was soon deep in conversation with other local men about the railroad that was rumored to be extending a line near their community. Lily found herself drawn into a circle of women that included Mrs. Peterson, now in her 70s but still a formidable presence in town affairs. "Your family is looking well, Lily," the older woman observed with satisfaction. "Those children of yours are growing like weeds." "Too quickly," Lily agreed with a smile. "Sophia is already talking about when she'll be old enough to attend the boarding school in Denver. Following in her mother's footsteps with education, is she?" Mrs. Peterson nodded approvingly. "And young James has his father's way with animals, from what I hear." "He does," Lily confirmed, pride evident in her voice. "Quinn says he has a natural touch, especially with the more difficult horses." Mrs. Peterson's eyes twinkled knowingly. "And how is that handsome husband of yours, still making your heart flutter after all these years?" A warm blush crept up Lily's cheeks, not unlike the one that had colored her face when Mrs. Peterson had asked about Quinn all those years ago. "He does," she admitted softly, her gaze seeking out Quinn in the crowd. As if sensing her attention, he looked up from his conversation and smiled at her, a private expression that still made her pulse quicken. "I knew it from the start," Mrs. Peterson declared with satisfaction. "Told Thomas right away that you two would suit. He didn't believe me at first, thought it was too hasty, too practical an arrangement to lead to real happiness. But I saw the way that man looked at you, even then." Lily's expression turned curious. "What do you mean, even then?" Mrs. Peterson patted her hand. "My dear, that man was half in love with you from the moment he spotted you by the bell tower. Why do you think he kept finding reasons to be there when you were? Thomas didn't need all those deliveries made. Quinn volunteered for them, especially when they might take him past the church around the time school let out." This revelation startled Lily. "Are you certain?" "As certain as I am that the sun rises in the east," Mrs. Peterson affirmed. "Some things, a woman just knows. And I knew that Cowboy had lost his heart to you long before he found the courage to speak of it." As evening fell and lanterns were lit throughout the town, a small band of local musicians began to play. Couples moved into the cleared area in the center of the street, beginning to dance beneath the stars. Quinn appeared at Lily's side, hand extended in invitation. "May I have this dance, Mrs. Walker?" he asked with formal courtesy that was belied by the mischievous glint in his eyes. "I'd be delighted, Mr. Walker," Lily replied, placing her hand in his. Though I do value my toes, Quinn laughed, drawing her into his arms with practiced ease. I've improved with age, he assured her, guiding her into a passable waltz that was indeed more graceful than his early attempts had been. As they moved together, Lily found herself reflecting on Mrs. Peterson's words. Did you know, she said conversationally, that apparently you were half in love with me before you ever proposed? Quinn missed a step, then recovered smoothly. Who's been telling tales, Mrs. Peterson? She says you volunteered for deliveries that would take you past the church when I might be there. A rueful smile crossed Quinn's face. That woman doesn't miss much, he conceded. Yes, I confess I found excuses to see you. From that first evening by the bell tower, there was something about you that called to me, I suppose. I told myself it was just concern for a woman in distress, but it was more than that. Why didn't you say anything sooner? Lily asked, genuinely curious. Quinn's expression turned serious. You were grieving, Lily, and I was a drifter with nothing to offer but myself. It wasn't until Mr. Peterson mentioned the ranch property that I dared to hope I might have something worthy to propose. Lily's heart swelled with tenderness for this man who had become the center of her world. You would have been enough, she said softly. Just you. The music slowed, and Quinn drew her closer, their bodies moving in perfect harmony born of years of intimacy. I look at our life sometimes, he murmured against her hair, at the children, the ranch, everything we've built together, and I can hardly believe it's real. That I could be so fortunate. It's very real, Lily assured him, leaning back to meet his gaze, and it's only the beginning. We have so many years ahead of us, Quinn, so many more memories to make. As if to underscore her words, Sophia came running up to them, her face alight with excitement. Papa, you promised to dance with me too, Quinn chuckled, releasing Lily with obvious reluctance. So I did, little one. Your mama will have to excuse me while I fulfill my obligation to another lovely lady. Lily watched with a full heart as Quinn lifted their daughter onto his feet and began to dance with her, Sophia's delighted laughter rising above the music. James and Elizabeth soon joined them, and Quinn gathered all three children into an impromptu dance that bore little resemblance to a waltz, but contained all the joy in the world. Later that night, as they made their way home under a canopy of stars, the children drowsy in the back of the wagon, Lily leaned against Quinn's solid presence on the driver's seat. It was a beautiful celebration, she said, contentment evident in her voice. It was, Quinn agreed. Though I couldn't help thinking, as they were talking about Blackwater Creek's 20 years, that for us the real anniversary is still to come. Lily smiled in the darkness. The day we met at the bell tower. 7 years ago next month, Quinn confirmed. I was thinking we might mark the occasion somehow, just the two of us. What did you have in mind? Lily asked, curiosity piqued by the note in his voice. Quinn's arm tightened around her shoulders. I thought we might take a trip, Mrs. Peterson has already agreed to watch the children for a few days. There's a new hotel in Denver that's supposed to be quite fine, with real bathtubs and a restaurant right inside. Denver, Lily repeated, surprised by the extravagance of the suggestion. They rarely traveled far from the ranch, between Quinn's responsibilities with the cattle and Lily's with the children. You've worked so hard these past years, Quinn said. Building our home, raising our children, supporting me through everything. I thought it might be nice for you to see something beyond Blackwater Creek, to have a few days just for yourself for us. Deeply touched by his thoughtfulness, Lily pressed a kiss to his cheek. It sounds wonderful, she said, though I hope you know I've never felt deprived staying close to home. Everything I've ever wanted is right here. The moonlight caught the gleam of Quinn's smile. Even so, a change of scene now and then isn't a bad thing. Besides, he added with a mischievous note in his voice, a hotel room with a door that locks and no children to interrupt might be a welcome luxury. Lily laughed softly, a warm anticipation kindling within her at the thought. Mr. Walker, are you attempting to seduce your wife? Every day for the past 7 years, Quinn replied, his voice dropping to a register that still sent shivers through her. And I intend to keep trying for at least 70 more. True to his word, Quinn arranged everything for their anniversary trip. On a crisp September morning, they bid farewell to their children, who were more excited about staying with Mrs. Peterson and her famous cookies than they were sad to see their parents leave. The train journey to Denver took most of the day, giving Lily time to marvel at the changing landscape outside the window and enjoy the rare luxury of Quinn's undivided attention without interruptions from little voices. The hotel was as grand as Quinn had promised, with electric lights in the lobby and plush carpets underfoot. Their room was spacious and elegantly appointed, with a large bed that made Lily blush slightly when the bellhop showed them in. "What do you think?" Quinn asked after the door closed behind the hotel employee. Lily turned in a slow circle, taking in the tasteful furnishings, the large window with its view of the city, and the door to an adjoining bathroom that promised the private bath Quinn had mentioned. "It's beautiful," she said. "I've never stayed anywhere so fine. Only the best for Mrs. Walker," Quinn said with a smile, coming to stand behind her and wrapping his arms around her waist. "We have reservations for dinner downstairs at 7, but until then." He pressed a kiss to the sensitive spot just below her ear. "I believe I mentioned something about the advantages of a room with a locking door." Lily turned in his embrace, her arms sliding around his neck. "So you did, Mr. Walker. So you did." The days in Denver passed in a pleasant blur of new experiences. They dined in fine restaurants, attended a theatrical performance, and spent one entire afternoon at a museum that displayed artifacts from ancient civilizations that fascinated them both. In the evenings, they returned to their hotel room to rediscover each other with the unhurried attention that daily life rarely permitted. On their final night in the city, after a particularly memorable dinner where they had splurged on champagne, Quinn led Lily to a small park near the hotel. The night was cool but not cold, with a 3/4 moon casting enough light for them to see their way along the paths. "I have something for you," Quinn said, reaching into his pocket as they sat on a bench beneath a large oak tree. "An anniversary gift." He withdrew a small velvet box and handed it to Lily, who took it with surprise. "Quinn, you've already given me this wonderful trip. You didn't need to open it," he encouraged gently. Inside the box was a gold locket on a delicate chain. Lily lifted it carefully, opening the hinged case to find miniature photographs inside on one side, a portrait of their 3 children taken just before their trip, and on the other, a photograph of Quinn that she had insisted he have taken at a studio in town the previous year. "Oh, Quinn," she breathed, tears welling in her eyes. "It's perfect." "I thought you might like to keep us close to your heart," he said, taking the locket from her trembling fingers and moving behind her to fasten it around her neck. "Even when the children are grown and gone, as they will be one day." Lily's hand rose to touch the locket where it rested against her skin. "Thank you," she whispered, turning to face him. "I'll treasure it always." Quinn took her hands in his expression growing serious. "Lily, these past 7 years have been the best of my life. Every day with you, with our children, on our land, it's more than I ever dreamed possible." He paused, swallowing visibly. "When I think of how close I came to riding past Blackwater Creek without stopping, or how you might have left for the city before I found the courage to speak to you." "But you did stop," Lily reminded him, squeezing his hands, "and I didn't leave." "Perhaps that wasn't chance at all, but providence." Quinn nodded, his eyes never leaving hers. "I believe it was. I believe we were meant to find each other, meant to build this life together." He raised one hand to gently trace the line of her cheek. "And I intend to spend every day we have left making sure you never regret the choice you made when you said yes to a homeless cowboy with nothing but hope and a promise." "I have never regretted it," Lily assured him, "not for a single moment." As they sat together beneath the oak tree, the sounds of the city muted around them, Lily reflected on the strange and wonderful path that had led her to this moment. From the depths of grief beside a church bell tower to the heights of joy in a Denver park, with all the challenges and triumphs in between it, was a journey she would not have traded for any other. Quinn's arm settled around her shoulders, drawing her close against his side. "What are you thinking, my love?" Lily smiled, leaning into his embrace. "I was thinking about answered prayers," she said, "and how sometimes they come in the most unexpected forms." Quinn pressed a kiss to her temple. like a drifting cowboy with a penchant for church bell towers. Exactly like that, Lily agreed, turning her face up to meet his kiss. Exactly like that. When they returned to Blackwater Creek, they found their children flourishing under Mrs. Peterson's indulgent care and their ranch in good order, thanks to the capable young man Quinn had hired to oversee things in their absence. Life quickly resumed its familiar rhythm, but something had shifted subtly between them, a renewal of purpose, a deepened appreciation for the life they had built together. As the years continued to pass, the Walker Ranch became one of the most prosperous in the region. Quinn's knack for breeding quality horses drew buyers from as far away as Kansas City, while Lily's small school gained a reputation for excellence that attracted children from neighboring homesteads. Sophia, true to her early ambitions, eventually departed for a women's college in the East, her letters home full of excitement about new ideas and possibilities. James took on increasing responsibility at the ranch, showing every sign of following in his father's footsteps with his own quiet strength and integrity. Elizabeth, the youngest, revealed a talent for art that Quinn encouraged by bringing her special papers and colors whenever he traveled to larger towns on business. Through it all, Quinn and Lily remained the steady center around which their family orbited, their love a beacon that guided their children and served as an example to the community of what a marriage could be, even one that had begun under such unusual circumstances. On their 20th anniversary, with Sophia home from college and James recently engaged to a sweet girl from a neighboring ranch, the family gathered for a special dinner. Elizabeth, now 17 and blossoming into a beauty that combined Quinn's dark coloring with Lily's delicate features, had prepared her mother's favorite dessert as a surprise. "A toast," Quinn proposed, raising his glass as they sat around the table that had expanded over the years to accommodate their growing family. "To 20 years of blessings beyond measure." "To Mama and Papa," Sophia added, her education having given her a poise and confidence that made Lily's heart swell with pride. "Whose love story has inspired us all." As glasses clinked and smiles were exchanged, Lily caught Quinn's eye across the table. In that moment, she saw reflected in his gaze all the years they had shared, the joys and sorrows, the triumphs and challenges, the quiet everyday moments that had woven together to create a tapestry of extraordinary beauty. Later that evening, after the younger generation had departed, Sophia to visit friends in town, James to call on his fiancée, and Elizabeth to her room with a new book, Quinn and Lily stood together on the porch of the home they had built. The ranch stretched before them, bathed in moonlight much as it had been on that first night they had arrived as newlyweds. But now the small, sparse homestead had grown into a thriving property with a large barn, numerous outbuildings, and fields dotted with cattle and horses. The house itself had expanded from its original modest size to a comfortable 2-story home that had sheltered them through seasons of growth and change. 20 years, Quinn mused, his arm around Lily's waist. At 53, his hair was now more salt than pepper, and the lines around his eyes had deepened, but he stood as straight and strong as ever. "Sometimes it feels like yesterday that I saw you sitting by that bell tower." "And sometimes it feels like we've always been together," Lily replied, leaning into his embrace. At 48, she remained slender, though childbearing had softened her figure and strands of silver now threaded through her chestnut hair. "As if everything before was just preparing us to find each other." Quinn turned to face her, taking both her hands in his. "Do you know what I thought that first moment I saw you?" he asked. Lily shook her head. "You never told me." "I thought, there she is," Quinn said simply. "As if I'd been looking for you all along without knowing it, as if some part of me recognized you before we'd even spoken." Tears gathered in Lily's eyes at the quiet revelation. "Oh, Quinn. I didn't believe in fate before I met you," he continued, his thumbs tracing gentle circles on the backs of her hands. "Didn't much believe in anything except what I could see and touch, but you changed that, Lily. You taught me to have faith in providence, in possibilities, in the power of love to build something lasting from the most unlikely beginnings." Lily freed one hand to touch his face, her fingers gentle against the weathered skin she knew as well as her own. "And you taught me that grief isn't the end of the story," she said softly. "That joy can follow sorrow, that new beginnings can arise from what seems like an ending." Quinn turned his face to press a kiss into her palm. 20 years isn't nearly enough," he murmured. "I want 20 more and 20 after that. So we shall have them," Lily promised, her eyes shining with love and conviction. Together. As they stood on the porch of the home they had built, surrounded by the evidence of a life well lived and the promise of more to come, the distant sound of the church bell in town rang out across the prairie. The sound carried on the night air, reaching them as it had on countless evenings throughout their years together, a reminder of where they had begun and of the faithful journey that had brought them here. Quinn smiled, drawing Lily close against his heart. "Prayers don't always come alone," he whispered, repeating the words that had first passed between them so long ago. And Lily, secure in the arms of the man who had been her unlikely answer, her unexpected blessing, her enduring love, completed the thought with absolute certainty. Sometimes they bring answers, too.